So, hello, everybody. I'm Toni Shuppe, CEO of Audit the Vote, joined here in Washington, D.C. at CPAC with probably the toughest woman I've ever met. Somebody I think we became really fast friends.
Yeah.
Sarah McAbee and her husband, Colton, who, for those that have followed Audit the Vote for a while, and if you haven't, you should definitely follow Colton and Sarah's story. They have I hate comparing J6 stories because they're all horrific in their own way. But there was something about hers that really struck me from the day I met her. And so I asked her, hey, let's get together, let's chat, let's have a conversation. Post what we thought wasn't possible.
Right.
When we met
Truly.
last August, I wasn't sure.
No, I wasn't sure on January 20th. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. It's just waiting November 5th into November 6th. I went to bed on election night. I went to bed like it was any other normal day because I was like, there's no way they're going to call the election tonight. There's no way they're going to call the election in the next few weeks.
Yep.
And
we were texting them.
I know. And my mom calls me around midnight and she was like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm in bed. What are you doing? She was like, you have to get up. Like, you have to turn on the news and watch it. And I'm like, no, Mom. Like, I can't. I already have so much stress in my life.
Right.
I don't need this added stress. And she was like, no, Sarah, I think they're going to call it for him. And then I start going through my phone and I have so many text messages of these people. And truly, people didn't go to sleep because they were afraid. They went to sleep in 2020. And when they woke up the next day, Trump was winning. And when they went to bed and then they woke up and Biden had won. And so I think people were truly afraid to go to sleep. But then you had people like me that I'm like, well, it's not going to matter either way.
Yeah.
And then they end up calling it on November 6th. And truly a shift happened. I mean, I had always felt like even over the holidays, over Christmas, like I go back to like the 90s, early 2000s, where you would go into, Christmas shopping into the market and stuff. And people would actually say, hi, Merry Christmas. How are you? That sort of thing, where for the last 4 years, everybody was so siloed. You'd go in. But I felt like this Christmas 2024, it was like that again. It was like this renewed hope. People started to speak out again, and it was like, and then little old pessimist me that just had so much happen, November or January 6th came and went, and I was waiting for something to happen again on the 6th. Not much like 2021, because I don't think they ever play the same things in the playbooks, but that they weren't going to certify the election, and then they did. And then the inauguration, we're going to move the inauguration inside. And I'm like, you're just constantly waiting for something. And so, I just really wasn't sure what was going to happen, but very grateful that the Lord moved. I truly believe the Lord showed his hand.
Completely. I get this question all the time in Pennsylvania, especially with people like, God love him, Scott Pressler running around saying that voter registration and he delivered Pennsylvania for Trump and blah, blah, blah. And yes, we need to turn out the votes.
Yeah.
If there's no new people being registered to vote and they don't show up, what is the purpose?
Right.
But what's not being talked about is all the stuff that you helped me with from August up until election day behind the scenes, getting poll watchers in place, getting people to watch the drop boxes to make sure mail-in ballots weren't being abused and in the dark of night. And we have stories that we just can't talk about publicly where that was being monitored and trucks were being watched coming into areas where they could have dropped tons of mail ballots, but they could sense that something wasn't right because we were watching and they turned around.
Right.
And there was no voter registration or ballot chasing operation that was going to outrun that.
Right.
Even election night, if you remember, I was getting a play-by-play. In fact, Joel, we left the hotel where we were holed up in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Like, kind of like this. Like, I don't know if I want to know. Like, my poll watchers were coming. Do you remember that? My poll watchers were coming back. The good news was this, I remember. They were telling me, in the city of Pittsburgh, he's getting 40% of the vote in the city, like in the blue areas. My precinct went 40%, which is really good. So that gave me some hope, but I was still doing this.
Constant. Yeah.
On the way home. And when I got home, again, same thing with you. Like, they're not going to call it. Really?
Right.
Like, the scenario I thought was never going to happen was exactly what happened.
No, I think America was kind of in complete shock, honestly.
Yeah.
That they called it, that they certified.
That she conceded the next day. I watched with my 14-year-old the next day, and we're just both looking at each other like.
I just thought it was so interesting. And I hope that the Democrats that attended her speech that she never came out to, probably because she was too drunk to even speak. But, I hope they never vote Democrat again, because this is what the Democrats do. They use you until they don't need you anymore, and then they just leave you hanging. Like, why couldn't she even come out and address her supporters?
That's a good point.
It just, but it doesn't matter because they always vote for their program or they vote for their cause. It has nothing to do with people as a whole.
Yep.
But, that's absolutely what the Democrats do. They string you along. Oh, we'll give you this. We'll give you that. We'll give you this program. Here's your phone. You rely on us. And then when it doesn't go their way, they're like, we don't need you anymore. Because it's blue cities. It's not blue states.
Right.
It's because it's always the cities that drive the states.
Yep.
And that's what they do. They go into these cities and they give them their phones. They give them, you look at the statistics of like WIC and all of the government subsidies that they get. You look at Section 8 housing. Where is all that stuff? That is in cities.
Wow.
And so the voting population in cities, of course they're gonna vote for that because that has been their lifestyle. And I feel so bad for these people because the majority of them are ignorant. I mean, we talk about Patriot Academy and how just in the general population, we don't know what our rights are.
Mm-mm.
We don't know. They don't teach us civics in school because they don't want us to. They don't teach us real American history because they don't want us to know what it is. But I also have a heart for the people in the inner cities that have been lied to their entire life because it's always, oh, well, the government will take care of you. Those are the scariest words I've ever heard. But they don't know that because they keep them to a point. They keep them oppressed.
Agreed.
Because they need them to be that way.
So your generation, are you technically a millennial? You a millennial? I'm a Gen Xer.
I'm 29, so I don't really know.
Is that a millennial?
I don't know.
Yeah. So my generation, I was born in 79. I grew up kind of in the 80s, but I was indoctrinated in school. I remember I was never taught not to trust the government. That's why they're not teaching history, because they don't want us to know that our founders poked their head up in the 1700s and says, wait a minute.
Well, and I think it's just so interesting. You go back and you study the founding fathers. The founding fathers were my age.
I know.
But the people that are involved in politics now are so much older. And that's not necessarily a problem because age also comes wisdom from everything that has happened to people in life, the good, the bad, the indifferent. But the fact is that it was young kids, the majority of young kids that came over and said, we saw what happened to the generations before us, our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents. We're not allowing that to happen anymore. They came to America, and those are the ones. I mean, honest to God, I did not know that Alexander Hamilton was so young until I watched the Broadway show. And then I was like, wait a second, because when they teach you history, they have the powder wigs and they have all these things. And you're like,
70.
You look at the presidents and how old they are. And you're like, oh, this had to be the older generation, but it's not. And the sad thing is that wasn't that long ago. If you truly think about it, it was only 250 years ago. But now you look at my generation and younger, and it's because everything has been pushed further back. You go to school until you're 18. And then you get out of school and then you go to college. And so you're in college until you're 24, 25, 26, depending on however long that is. And then you get out and you work a mediocre job because they lied to you that you're going to go to school, get a good education and get a good job. That doesn't happen unless you're a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. But you still have to build up.
And even the public school, they put you into that. They're already grooming you as a kid for that standard 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. You get 2 days to live your life. It's disgusting.
Yes, the indoctrination way back then. Yep. And then they get out of school and they get some mediocre job and then they have to go find love. So everything is constantly being pushed back. People, I don't truly believe, experience life unless they have something happen to them out of the norm until they're in their mid-30s. And then that's when they settle down and then they realize, well, wait, I'm paying student loans now because I took out all of these loans for so many years. I'm trying to buy a house and I can't afford it. I have credit card debt because I couldn't work and go to school at the same time or even keep up with my bills, even if I was working. They have car loans, all of that. And now they're starting to realize, hey, I make X amount of dollars, or I should be making X amount of dollars every 2 weeks. But I'm not. People adjust their lifestyle to what is on the bottom line of that check because they're just not realizing what's being taken out for federal taxes, state taxes, FICA, Social Security. My opinion, we should be paying back. Well, we can talk about abolishing the IRS another time. I have strong feelings about that. But, if you were going to teach people truly civics and the government, we should get our entire check from our employer, and then we should have to write back whatever we owe.
Amen.
You know how much that would change people's thought process? They don't want that, though.
Nope.
They condition you. And then you work 40 years and you get a retirement if you're lucky. And then that's why people are working at Walmart and Target.
But at 29 years old, you get this. Why are you different? What made you different? Or is that for another podcast?
I mean, we can definitely skim the surface. I just was taught differently.
Yeah.
I mean, I came from a family of business owners that, they didn't come from something. They pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. My dad went off into the military. My mom got married when she was 17 to go off with him, finished school while he was in the military. And then when he got out, because he was like, we're not having kids while we're in the military because I'm going to get stuck, right? Because he sees all of these people. Once you start having kids, you have to resign, you get bonuses, all of that stuff. He was like, we're not doing that. But then, he left the military and went out, and then he just went into the corporate world and started to just do his own thing and ended up owning 7-Elevens. And then my mom was able to retire because they built businesses on the side that generated a passive income. And that was the thing. They had to teach themselves this stuff because it wasn't taught in school how to make money work for you. It was dollars for hours.
Yep.
And so I just really came into this mentorship from a very young age, seeing my parents work the way that they worked and seeing what happened behind closed doors, right? And so I just had that different thought process about money anyway, because I absolutely believe government programs are in place for a reason. But why aren't there time limits on things? Right? Like you need WIC. Okay, well why do you get that forever and you keep applying and you keep having babies to get all of this money? Well, you should be cut off from that. There should be time limits in place. It's for you to get back on your feet, not for you to live on your life.
And that's what you discover when you start digging into this stuff. Even the USA, I don't know why they're calling it AID. So we don't get away from it being US aid.
Yeah.
Even stuff like that was started with a noble cause.
Right.
It wasn't, and it got corrupted over time.
Because there is no accountability. That is the entire thing that I hope the Trump administration does over the next 4 years. Every little thing. And I think with Elon and the Department of Government Efficiency, that's what it's showing. You mean to tell me that we spend $10 million a year on salmon research and plankton research, and that we spend $3 million a year watching hamsters fight on steroids? People that believe that just have their heads in the sand, because that's not what's happening. It's called money laundering. And they're writing it off as something insane. Is that because they think we're stupid?
Yes, they do. Well,
they think that we can't think for ourselves.
Before 2020, a lot of the world were just asleep. I wouldn't call them stupid.
I really think this new, whether you want to call it a reawakening or an awakening or whatever term people want to say, I think they really realized, with the second administration of Obama. I don't even think it was the first, because everybody, he ran on hope and change and all of these things that people wanted to see. Yeah. I want hope and change, and I'm not a liberal.
It was a brilliant marketing strategy.
It was, but then the second term came around and they're like, well, you didn't do it in the first term, so why are you going to do it in the second term? And then all of these things just started to come out. You had Benghazi that had happened. You had all of the school shootings that was going on. You had the housing crisis. We were truly, at that point, we were in a depression, and people just weren't seeing it. You had all of the cars, the automotive factories in Detroit. Our country was literally perishing right in front of us. And then, then Trump walks in and comes down the escalators and says, I'm going to run. And I think that truly instilled hope into people. America is a business, like it or not. So why wouldn't you have a businessman run this country that has done so well in life?
You gotta meet my husband. He would love it.
But that's what it boils down to, It's like American. And so they got a taste of it for 4 years. And then it was ripped away from them again. And then I think that's when really it kind of shook people to their core.
Yep.
Where our elections are stolen, and they have been stolen for a very long time. These people are selected. They are not elected. Mm-hmm. Oh, they might throw you a bone every once in a while, but then they buy these people off. I always say they come to them in the dark of the night and they say, this is what we have. We're going to put it on your computer, or we have this because you have a skeleton in your closet, and they completely buy them off. I mean, out of 535 members of Congress, I could probably count maybe 2 that I could trust. Maybe 2. Are there good people in there? Did they go in with good intentions? Yes.
And you have seen the political game that you have to play to get anything done.
Yes, it's the long game.
Yes.
It's not the short game,
right.
And actually I was talking to somebody about this. They were talking about Cash's confirmation hearing and how January 6th was brought up, and he wanted to talk about the violent versus nonviolent and about the proceeds that he ran through his foundation for the Justice for All song, and he was like, I don't know who this was run from my foundation. I didn't know that there were violent people singing on the song, all that. And as an immediate frustration, because what the truth is. And it's not that he lied. He didn't lie.
Right.
But for us, it's like, well, we know what the actual truth is. And it was a matter of, it was a very political answer, just beating around the bush. And it was like, no, you have to realize it was the long game. If he didn't get in as the FBI director, he wouldn't have been able to clean out what I hope he is able to completely. In my opinion, why do you need federal law enforcement?
Agreed.
You have state law enforcement, county law enforcement, city law enforcement. Why do you need federal law enforcement?
Brown shirts, because they're headed to, brown shirts.
That's what it is. At some point, they hope to put us all in cars and go on our merry way.
Yep.
And I hope that the last 4 years, it absolutely had to happen the way that it did. In some instances,
it's painful to say, isn't it?
Well, you know what's really painful to say? In some instances, I wish it was worse than what it was, because I don't think it. I think for maybe the majority of people, I don't know, had something happen where they were like, hey, something's not right, but not for the majority of people to take action, because still for 4 years, people were silent about the election. They were silent about our southern border. They were silent about the drugs that were being brought in from the cartel and killing American citizens. They were silent about the indoctrination of kids in schools. They were silent about January 6th, about any political weaponization.
And now they're all of a sudden emboldened because they feel
on
safe.
November the 6th, it was like, oh, our First Amendment was restored.
Yeah.
No,
well, no,
the last 4 years happened because we, the people, allowed it to happen. And I don't think people don't want to take responsibility for it.
Yep.
January 6th, people sat in prison for 1,400 plus days, had their rights completely dissolved because we, the people, allowed it to happen. But it is our job to empower other Americans to say, you know what, we do have a constitution. And if something does happen to you, because unfortunately things do happen in life, like, we will take care of you. But that's just not the way it was.
I shift gears, but I do want to talk about life after the election, because it has to be so surreal to have Colton home. I remember asking you about the transition, like, what is it looking like after he won? They called it, and we're still like reeling. It's Thanksgiving. Like, are we really
waiting for the other shoe to drop?
Yeah, like, what's going on? And you had mentioned there was, talks in his transition team of the pardon. What was going on that you can talk about behind the scenes?
I do know that they were talking about case by case, because even people that were labeled violent weren't necessarily violent, or people that got caught up in the moment and did bad things on January 6th, they'd served their time.
Right.
And in the majority of cases. Right. And no person, I really don't care what you have done. No person gets to have their constitutional rights dissolved. I mean, not only do we have human and God-given rights, we have constitutional rights as Americans. And so to watch that happen, and Trump coming out of the gates and pardoning everybody unconditionally and commuting the sentences of those that they were going to look at on a very small, I think it was like 14
well, there's still,
cases.
That's what I don't understand. There's still some that are still in jail.
Yes, we can talk about that.
Okay.
But I really think President Trump knew in the very beginning. I think he knew he was going to pardon everybody, regardless of it, because it was the biggest middle finger to the Department of Justice to say, you are not going to do this to American citizens, regardless. You look at what happened in 2020, you look at what happened in 2017 with his inauguration, and nothing happened to those people, or if it did, it was a slap on the wrist and they get to move on. But then you have somebody who was praying and was being beaten by police and decided to defend themselves. Oh, well, you get to be thrown in federal prison. I mean, not only in like camps that like we see on TV, and it's like, oh, federal prison looks great. No, some of these people are being housed in United States penitentiaries, the highest of highs. And for what? Because they got caught up in the moment on January 6th. They had served their time. They were sitting pretrial. And so I don't think people truly understand, that we are still on this journey. Just because President Trump pardoned them on January 20th, that just means the prison walls came down. But it doesn't really change anything for them mentally. I mean, I was telling people today that, it's like most of the time when you come out of prison, you have this transition period where it's like, oh, well, now you're at a halfway house and we will help you get a job. And, you still do visitation. We'll give you a 48-hour pass to be able to go home. And so you have these like slow things, these steps. No, these guys literally walked out of federal prison with nothing on their record anymore. Just that, no probation, no any of that. Their sentence was done, and so it's even this new
reality.
Yeah, and
what's that like for Colton?
It's different. it's I don't want to say it's bad. There's aspects of it's good. There's aspects of it that are indifferent. But for him to come out, he very much is, man of the household, wants to provide for his family. I mean, he's a man, and a proud man at that. And for him to come out and have lost virtually everything, his home, his vehicle, his family, his career, gone. Not like, I mean, you're talking about a line in the concrete. This wasn't a line in the sand that maybe over time these things can change. It's not. It was a line in the concrete that was drawn in his life. And so now it's navigating that, to the point that there's sometimes he's like, I don't even want to meet so and so because I don't have a job. And it's like, nobody even cares about that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's just this stigma that they have, that they're like, no, I want to be able to provide. I want to be able to say I have my life together, So it's a matter of like learning how to be humble, how to ask for help, to not be so prideful in that manner, because, he always says, no, I'm not a hero. I was just an individual that upheld my oath of office that day. But he absolutely is a hero.
Yeah.
Much like I would say these other January 6 defendants, even though some I wouldn't put my name behind, because not all January 6 defendants are the same. But I will say they withstood the test of time, and they exposed how corrupt this justice system was. And so it's like, it's a matter of figuring out life again, that nobody tells you when to wake up, when to go to bed, when you can take a shower, what to wear, when to go to work, when you can go outside, the things that we make thousands of mindless decisions a day, thousands of them. And they go down to making, I think, like 48 or something like that. It's such a small number. And then, you walk into the market and you have all of these choices of shampoos, volumizing shampoo, smell good shampoo, 2-in-1 conditioner, all of these things, right? And each brand has 12 on the shelf. They, for the last 3.5 years, had one. And so it's like a matter of that, like, yeah, and like a mind shift change, because you're hard on yourself because you think life should look different, and it doesn't. But it's okay that it's not what you thought it was going to be. So it's this whole navigating this new, you go 3.5 years of living by yourself and constantly living in fight or flight mode, having to do everything for everybody, not wanting to walk away from your phone because you're afraid it's going to ring, having your Apple Watch on you so you can be like, oh, hey, let me go grab my phone, because you had no way to call them back, and so it's this whole shift in truly reintegrating into life, and I just always go back to why I'm so passionate about justice and prison reform, is because we, of course, want to be the hands and feet of Christ, but they talk about that in the Bible, to not leave the prisoner behind. I mean, we are talking about men and women that are going to be our neighbors in the future, that are our churchgoers, that, we pass people. 1 in 4 Americans are affected by the incarceration system.
Really?
We incarcerate more people per capita than any other country in the world. Yet our recidivism rate is the highest in the world at 44%, because they condition them. And so it's a matter of breaking all of that. And so just because those prison walls came down on the 20th doesn't, I mean, it's a very big journey ahead for all of these January 6 defendants, And I say each of them are different in their own manner because they come from different walks of life. But the fact that some of them came home and walked right back into a job, walked right back into the house that they had left, and their families and all of these things. And then some people still have nothing. And so it's a matter of, survivor's guilt. One thing that I was very concerned about during Colt's incarceration, because every time he was denied bond, we'd go back up for bond, even though it was like this long process. One thing that I was really concerned about was, it was in May, I believe it was in May of 23, and he was preparing to go to trial in October of 23. And he went up for bond, and I told him, I'm like, as hard as this is, you're only less than 100 days out from trial. Like, can you please just walk in and say, I don't want this hearing. Like, please sign the denial paperwork or whatever you needed, a motion to dismiss. Because I was very afraid of what the survivor's guilt was going to look like after he had been in there for so long with these guys, to come out 100 days before trial, we knew what we were up against.
Yeah.
We knew he was going to be found guilty, and like we just didn't know the timeline. We didn't know what any of that looked like, right? But when it's a 99.6 conviction rate, well, you'd be pretty dumb
Where's
to think
the
you're going to
point
get
for?
off.
Was anybody like
2 people.
Pam, crazy lady. She went crazy.
No, she took a plea deal.
Okay.
That's
Good on
another
her.
reason it was so high, because I truly believe if these individuals, and I get that everybody's circumstances are different. I haven't walked their shoes, so I don't sit in judgment. But I believe that if they had withstood this process, they would have clogged the system. They were not prosecuting 67% of crimes in Washington, D.C. because the court system was clogged with January 6 defendants.
Got it.
And the majority of January 6 defendants took a plea deal because they didn't want their lives put on blast in trial. They couldn't afford to go to trial. They, all of these different things. So they were like, let me just sign the paperwork. Yep. Let me get this over with, because they kept me for 2 freaking years.
Yep.
So we knew what we were up against, but it was just a matter of the survivor's guilt, of I don't know how he would sleep at night knowing these guys were still in prison. And so to an extent, there is still survivor's guilt there, because you're looking at all of these other people that, you're just comparing yourself to these different defendants. And it's like, you can't do that, because everybody is on their own journey. Everybody has their own calling. I mean, it truly takes a village, and so just a lot of different things that fold into what post-incarceration looks like, and I say all the time, there is no handbook. There is no handbook for January 6th. There is no handbook for fighting the federal government. And there truly is no handbook for what each person's life post-incarceration looks like.
So if you had to start, though, I do want to get your perspective on a couple of things before we wrap up, because what time do we got? Okay. What does federal prison, if you could say these are the first few things that need done to start the process of breaking this very broken system down to rebuild, where do we start?
The immediate thing would be oversight and accountability. The guards need training. Nobody grows up and be like, I want to be a prison guard. It's just something that
abuse people.
Right, but the majority of them just sit in there and just do their job. So they will sit in their little, behind their glass, and they'll just sit there and turn a blind eye because they don't want to fill out the paperwork or any, all of that. They need to be trained. They need to treat inmates like American citizens. I mean, there were conditions that they lived in that if animals were living in these conditions, PETA would get involved. But these are the way Americans are living. And, it all goes back to respect. It's earned and given in the same breath. I have an entire list. The entire system is broken, from everything from visitation to commissary to they get paid 14 cents an hour to work, and yet, they're making canteens for the U.S. military to sell to Ukraine, to they keep condemned facilities open because they have Unicor on site, which is their factory, and they make $4 million a year at Unicor, so they can pay their $1 million fine a year to stay open, and yet these people are living in filth. And that is why there's all of these things that make the recidivism rate so high. And there's things that we could change without making a big difference. I am not kidding you when I tell you that when we walk in for visitation, they have vending machines there. They don't give you real food. You have to eat food out of the vending machines. And, so visitation was Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Saturday and Sunday are the busiest days because people bring their kids in, and all of that. So by Monday, there's no food left. So you sit there for 6 hours and hardly have anything to eat. And then you go and you warm up your little sandwich you got or something, and the condiments are from 3 years ago. That's not just what they're feeding inmates. That's what they're feeding their visitors. Or you walk in on Saturday morning, you're like, oh, I'm going to, get food for lunch. So we have something to eat. And there's no food in there because the guards were eating out of the vending machines. So it's all of these crazy things that, they could integrate the kids. Why isn't something as simple? And this is something that, we really want to talk to the Trump administration about, because they want to bring businesses back to America. Why can't they build these factories by federal prisons and let these inmates work for minimum wage? That's fine. And give them what their allowance is, $300 a month, so they can put money on their books. They can buy stuff off of commissary and send the rest home, or put it in a trust account for when they get out. But then these men wouldn't feel such burdens to their family, because they're able to pay for child support. They're able to pay for their kids' tuition or their little school trip that they're going to go on, or clothes for when they go back to school, or, they're going on vacation. Okay, we'll send them $100 so they can buy something or do something that they want to do. But again, it all goes back to, it's just a bunch of sheep. And that's what they want. They want to indoctrinate them. They want them to stay in this little box. No, they don't. And that's the thing. These people are going to be our neighbors. So why wouldn't we want to contribute back to society for the next generation to come?
What does your nonprofit stand in the gap? What's next for it?
That is it. Is completely pivoting to justice reform. So, one arm being the Federal Bureau of Prisons, because I believe that if we can start with 127 prisons that are federally run in America, it could trickle down to the states, and we can say, hey, listen, this worked in the federal prisons, let's implement it in the states, and then it can go to the county and the city jails as well. There should be no private prisons in America.
I didn't know there
were. There are, and they make a lot of money.
Oh wait, who did I hear say a judge would own? I think it was someone else that I had on.
No, it is judges. Yes, judges own stake into these prisons. And so, like, for example, when you are in, so the majority of these January 6th defendants, when you are going up against the federal government for whatever it is, you're in U.S. Marshal custody. So until you are convicted, sentenced, and then you're switched off to the Federal Bureau of Prisons, the majority of the people, all of the people are in U.S. Marshal custody. Well, there are no U.S. Marshal federal prisons or holding facilities. And so they rent beds from county, city, state, private prisons. And so they pay X amount of dollars to put people in these beds. Well, that's where the money comes from. Well, they're paying, I don't know, something crazy like, don't quote me on the numbers. I'm not even going to say them, but it's a crazy amount of money per bed per month. And yet they're not even spending that money on them. They get crap food, that's exactly what it is. And so that's why these judges and all these people are involved in this stuff, because they make money off of it. So, but even at that, those aren't even private prisons. These private prisons operate completely separately. You can look up Core Civic. It's a huge private prison system in America.
So how do you get into a private prison system if you commit a crime? How do you?
It's where they are jurisdictioned at, where they're placed. We have private prisons in Tennessee, but there should be no private prisons in America. There should be federal, state, county, and city.
Wow.
And they shouldn't be making money off of these people. And so there's just so many arms off of these things, for the businesses, if they would be willing to partner with federal prisons, give them a tax break. You're helping rehabilitate. And then when these people get out, if they are good at their job, now granted, don't get me wrong, there are bad people in federal prison or in prison in general that do bad things. And there are people that don't want to rehabilitate themselves. Right. That's fine, sitting there. If you want to waste your life, sitting there, whatever. But these other people that truly do want to get back to their families and, have better lives.
Can't be that high by, naturally.
Right. So, then they might have something secured when they come out. If their boss liked them and they were good at their job, well, let them excel in that career. Wow. But there's all these things. Well, then that's the prison reform side. Well, then you have the justice reform side. And we call it justice reform because then you have the court side of things where, a lot of people don't know that in our Constitution, you are allowed to be represented at a grand jury, and you are allowed to have an attorney there with you. But this stuff happens behind closed doors. You don't even know what's going on until you have a warrant served for your arrest. And that's unconstitutional, So from that all the way through the point of you being sentenced and hand off to whatever prison system, it's broken. You can't claim self-defense or defense of a third party as a January 6th defendant in Washington, D.C. Why? Because they make up the rules. The majority of these people didn't get bond because they literally made 6 Crestman rules. This gentleman's name, William Crestman, was a January 6th defendant, and they made 6 rules based off of his case. And if you checked any of those 6 boxes, you were denied bond. It's just they operate the way that they do because we allow them to, right? Because there is no oversight into any of that. And so really, I think that, having all of these people that have come together for January 6th, every walk of life. I mean, you have career criminals that, change their life around and, now have a passion to go back and fix the system. You have people like Cold, that's a law enforcement officer that's like, no, this system needs to be fixed on the guard side. So I think all of these perspectives come into play because I've always said we can't let their sacrifices go in vain.
Amen. And what I'm trying to impart to people in election integrity is we are just getting started.
Yeah.
I know it's a win and it feels like a big relief. But really and truly, the system is nowhere near.
No, it's
where it
time to
needs
roll
be.
up our sleeves, and the hard
Yep.
work now begins.
Yep.
It was hard work before, but this is even harder
We were
work now.
survival. The house was burning down. We were in survival mode.
Yes.
Now it's time for a plan.
Now
and
it's
a
put out.
Yes.
So now it's like, how do we rebuild the house? Where do we
Yes.
get the lumber from? You know, all of those things. But
Yes.
I think people too soon forget how the election integrity and January 6th are intertwined.
I'll say.
People showed up to January 6th because of the stolen election.
Amen.
And then they were persecuted for, at what point in American history did it become a problem to say, hey, I have a question?
Mm-hmm.
That's all they said. But when they showed up at their doorstep, when the American people showed up at their doorstep, that's when they were like, you have come too far. But it all boils down to election integrity. I mean, everything, our southern border, our indoctrination of our kids in schools, the political persecution that happened, the weaponization of government happened because of the people in power.
And I really hope that they're able to get to the bottom of that. And some of the stuff I've seen on X that Sidney Powell was saying, of course, they painted her as a lunatic.
Yep.
But she was starting to show how the Smartmatic and the software and Dominion, how it did start in Venezuela.
Yes.
Venezuela didn't vote their way into communism.
No, nobody votes their way into
Nobody
communism,
votes
and they
their
got to
way
shoot
into
their
it.
way out of it.
And she was showing how it changed hands in Sequoia, and it was a really interesting thread that I hope that the problem is we never got to the bottom of it.
Right.
No real investigation, unbiased, was ever done.
No, because all the judges would shoot it down.
Yeah. And I hope with the new Trump administration that we can get to the bottom of some of that stuff.
You know, I absolutely agree. And my hope is with this administration is that they realize how corrupt it was. Because I believe President Trump was a really good president in the first term.
I do too.
But he had a lot of people in his ear that was giving him bad advice and just telling him all the wrong things because they're swamp creatures.
And he had no idea what he was up against.
Nothing. I truly don't believe he knew what he was up against. And he still wanted to believe the good in some of these people.
I know.
There is very few good people left in Washington, D.C.
I
because
know.
evil completely runs it.
I feel dirty being here. Do you feel dirty?
As soon as I cross over the river, I have this almost like suffocating feeling. I mean, there is just this sense of evilness in this city.
I agree.
I mean, who knows what goes on underneath? Who knows what goes on in that river over there? I mean, it is just... I hope it's completely dismantled over the next 4 years.
It's an eerie feeling. It is. Last question. What's next for you and Colt as a couple, as a married couple?
You know, to figure out life again. It feels so weird to say that, but it's like, you know, I was so used to living alone. He had to learn how to live on the inside, and I had to learn how to live on the outside. And there was so much that happened that we came to terms in the very beginning that if there wasn't something that we could do about it for each other, then we weren't going to bother each other about it. Because it was like he dealt with things on the inside that as his significant other and his partner, I want to help. I would want to do, and I couldn't. My hands were tied. But then I felt that same way out here for him being the man of the house and, you know, the godly man that he is, that there were things that happened to me out here that I just couldn't tell him because there was nothing for him to do about it. There's no reason for him to sit there and worry about it. So it's like literally our lives went like this, completely separate. And now it's a matter of like going like this, you know what I mean? And in all good things. But it's just different.
I'm sure. Well, I'm looking forward to getting you guys together on a live podcast.
Oh, it's going to be so much fun.
Just getting to meet him. I can't wait to meet him.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
We saw each other today. We hugged each other. I knew we were texted, knew you were here, but I didn't expect to see you so early.
Yeah.
So,
no, I'm glad. It was a God thing.
It was a God thing.
Yeah.
Fast friends, forever friends. Feels so good. So, well, congratulations. Please feel free to support her nonprofit, Stand in the Gap.
Foundation.
You say it so I don't screw it up.
Stand in the Gap. Foundation.
Stand in the Gap. Foundation. A lot of work ahead. Tons of work ahead. A solid J6 community that is doing good things. I see it in election integrity. She sees it in J6. There's circles within circles within circles that we really don't know who's good and who's bad in every single one of these movements. But we've come to a mutual trust in each other. So she'll vet people my way. I'll vet people her way. And I can truly say if you give to that foundation, it will go to a January 6th family to rehabilitate them. So,
well, thank you. I so appreciate it.
You're very welcome. See you guys soon. Circles within circles that we really don't know who's good and who's bad in every single one of these movements. But we've come to a mutual trust in each other. So she'll vet people my way. I'll vet people her way. And I can truly say if you give to that foundation, it will go to a January 6th